Hello, friends. Mm, so tonight, sorry about that. So tonight we're going to talk about a surface and depth, and how most people actually live on the surface, and how some of us prefer depth, and what is depth for surface people, and what is surface for deep people. Maybe. So on the surface appears that we're all different and separate, and we have divided ourselves in terms of nationality, in terms of gender to begin with. Mm, Nationality, race, uh, before nationality, and then we have all of these other divisions based on social status and how beautiful a person is, how successful a person is, as the predominant societal definition of success. uh, and when we meet somebody, if we're a surface person, that's what we focus on. How old are you, what gender, what nationality, are you pretty or beautiful or successful, how do you appear, and how are you defined by these like very basic generic definitions. And some people stop there. They immediately classify somebody into those categories, and then it's kind of like, okay, this is who that person is. And by that category, we can say, I'm a woman, I'm originally from Bulgaria, but I live in the US. I'm an artist and photographer. Um, I'm going to be 42 in a few days. And this is who I am, right? I'm just this person. Divorced, there's your category. And, but there's so much more to me, right? And if I start to go deeper, then it could be like, what do you like, what don't you like, what do you believe in? But then if we start to go deeper, I like to go into qualities, and that's where it gets interesting, and that's where there's a lot of unconscious like stuff happening, because the person can categorize you in those things, and based on those categories they can create this assumption of who you're supposed to be. But then, if they start to get to know you a little bit, thank you so much. Thanks, Tony, and thanks for the birthday wishes, Xload. If a person starts to get to know you a little bit, then they can see, oh, for example, you're kind and you're very loving and compassionate and courageous, and you have handled difficulties with grace. And when a person begins to see like some of your deeper qualities, that's when interesting things can happen, because they can either really be drawn to that and want to be closer to you because those are qualities that they appreciate, or they can feel threatened because maybe they thought that they're very kind and loving and wise and courageous, but there you show up and you are kinder and more loving and more courageous. And all of a sudden they feel threatened because, like, who are you? Like, you're younger. Why should you be like this? Or you're like this. Like, doesn't make sense. Like, why? So that's where people can start to develop a lot of jealousy and envy, which most of the time is unconscious because nobody wants to admit that they're actually jealous and envious. And then they can start to act really passive aggressive towards somebody because those people don't know themselves. And the person who is more conscious serves as a mirror, mirroring back people's assumptions. And if they thought they were a certain way, a person shows up and shows them, no, you actually are not. And that triggers the hell out of people. But it's all good because it's all meant to be for the purpose of becoming more conscious. And a more conscious person, when they meet somebody who exhibits a quality that they have not developed in themselves, or a certain quality that the other person exhibits more of, would actually be inspired by that person and want to be around them in their energy, and just so they can develop that inside of themselves too. And they will praise that quality because by praising it in another, we unlock it within ourselves as well. And if we're jealous and envious of that quality in another person, we block it from ourselves. So it's really interesting how these things work, and how the deeper you go and the deeper you begin to know yourself, all of a sudden you actually know other people very well, even better than they know themselves, because you can notice all of these nuances and you can pay attention to not what they say, who they are, but how they act. And you can see certain things that can actually be in contradiction to what a person says they are. Because most of the time we don't want to acknowledge the things that we consider more negative about ourselves. And that's why a lot of times, we notice them in others, and we shame others and blame others for those things. But that's when psychological projection happens, when a person does something that is actually not nice, and they will project it on another person and blame them for that thing, which I've had a lot of that happen too, and it took me forever to figure it out. But it's like a defensive mechanism of the ego, because the ego doesn't want to face itself and become more conscious and accept that, oh wow, I actually am mean, or I did this like horrible thing. So it's easy to project it outward on somebody, and that is, the shadow work. But in any case, the purpose of this was to talk about surface and depth, and how the deeper we go, the more we know, and how everybody who's on the surface has a lot of depth. It's just that they have not explored and integrated it, and how we're kind of like an iceberg. And the person who is deep, that cannot be seen on the surface. And a surface person will never be able to grasp the depth of a deep person. But a deep person will see through the surface of the surface person, and perceive their depth that the surface person is unaware of. Did I confuse you? So yeah, it's really interesting how the surface person sees you and thinks that they know all about you. But when you're a deep person, you see the surface person and you actually know all about them, including everything that they're unaware of. But they're under the illusion that they know all about you, not knowing that you actually know all about them and they don't know anything about you. It just makes me laugh. Life is so fascinating like that, because we live in this world of seeming opposites, and things are really not as they seem. And in this game that we play, everything is kind of topsy turvy. But it's fascinating to be deep and to explore yourself. And through exploring yourself, you learn so much about the world and others, because technically there are no others, and we're all one. So I love going deeper and deeper into things and learning more and more. And it's always nice when you're a deep person to be perceived by another deep person. and to be able to go deeper together and explore more. And it's also funny when you try to take a surface person deep and they freak out seeing their own shadows, but they project them on you naturally because they can't own them. That's how unconscious they are. And they don't realize that through owning the shadow and going through those initiation gates is how you develop that wisdom and that grounded nature and rootedness, and you can really grow sky high and be a big tree and not be afraid of any storm because you're deeply rooted. And how the most fascinating things are the invisible ones. And how the more sensitive you get, the more you can perceive them. And it's endless, honestly.